welcome everyone to the Oregon Chapter Monthly Virtual Conference. We're excited you can join us today for some great education. The sponsor is our Diamond-sponsored Guidehouse. They are recognized as a top healthcare consulting firm. Consultants collaborate with hospitals, hospital physicians, payers, and government entities to help their clients thrive. Thank you, Guidehouse, for your sponsorship. This session is 4 Secrets to Becoming a Star, How to Obtain Success in Your Personal and Professional Life by Ihde. So Neil is a speaker, lecturer, consultant, and founder of Life IQ, where he motivates groups and individuals to work, play, relate, and live intelligently. He's worked with numerous managers, directors, corporate leaders, teams to improve their personal and professional effectiveness. Neil's worked with over 25 Fortune 500 companies, including AT&T, Discover Card, Domino's, Transamerica, GE, among many others. He's a TEDx speaker, and his Life IQ YouTube channel recently eclipsed 500,000 views. Neil's academic background includes a BA in psychology and a BA in psychology and an MA in counseling. Neil and his wife Deb have 2 children and live in Appleton, Wisconsin. Welcome, Neil.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that introduction. And yeah, even though I guess we still have 2 children, we just launched one. Our daughter is now in college and she's off in Minneapolis, and I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I don't want to flex too much. I think that's a term the kids are using these days, but I'm looking out at some beautiful blue skies, as John and I were talking about the air quality you have out there. And it is stunning the amount of stressors that you're dealing with, whether or not it's protesters or COVID or wildfires or just even the air that you breathe. And so we are we're going to commit maybe to these next 90 minutes or so to just kind of focusing on some things that we can control, some positive things. In fact, I threw this slide in here just a little bit before our time together, thinking, there's a lot of things that we are worried about that are weighing on us. But the reality is how much that we have influence over is much, much smaller. So during our time together, we're going to just be focused on those things that we can improve in our personal and professional life. And I'm pretty laid back as a speaker. I've been doing this for a long time and adjusting to doing these virtual presentations. And so pretty laid back. If you have some questions as we go along, if we have some things in the chat, Tammy and John are going to be helping me out with that. So feel free to do that. I ask for a little bit of patience and grace if we have some transitions between some things here too, because we do want to have some interaction. I love being in front of audiences and have gotten used to this. I just found out yesterday, I think I have my first face-to-face presentation in, well, the last one was in February. The first one will be coming up at the end of October. So I'm really looking forward to that. But one of the things that I love about presenting to audiences is the dynamic nature. So we're going to do our best that we can to replicate that in this environment. So the chat feature will be there. We'll have one poll question. At some point, there will be 2 or 3 times that I will assign you to different rooms just to have a further conversation, to dialogue with just one other individual about some of the points that we're talking about here. So sound okay so far? Tammy, John, if we're good, we're going to jump into the content here. Let me know and feel free to jump in with anything that's maybe not coming across as well on your end. But I need to start out with a story. 4 Secrets to Becoming a Star is one of my signature topics. I've been speaking on this for 15 years, and the origin of this talk goes way back to the early part of my marriage. This was the BC era of my marriage, and for those of you with kids, you are already deducing that that's the before children era. And In the BC era, you don't have nearly the responsibilities, although it was fascinating to think that we thought we were busy before that, before having kids. But in the BC era, if you want to just take off some weekend and go skiing, you can do that. And we were living in La Crosse, Wisconsin at that point, and we said, you know what, let's head out to Colorado. And this was late 90s when we were doing this. And so we headed down I-80 across Nebraska to do some skiing. And I don't know if any of you have been on I-80 in western Nebraska, but it doesn't boast of the same scenery as Colorado or some of the western states. And we were trying to make the time pass. We had cell phones. I have a picture of a cell phone there, but we couldn't do anything on it except call. We didn't have portable DVD players. And so we were finding a way to pass the time and make the miles go by. And we stumbled upon this topic of some of our favorite people in our lives. And I want you to start thinking already about some of the favorite people in your life, because that's going to be the first breakout room that we have. But we started talking about coaches and relatives and friends and professors and high school teachers and these people that had an impact on our lives, that had an influence over how we are shaped, and the people that we became. And as we started recalling these folks and telling stories, the miles just ended up flying by. And so what I did after that trip, I made a list of all the people that we talked about, and I started putting together some of the common characteristics that they have. And as I did that, I noticed some overlapping themes. And that's really what we are going to be talking about today. We're going to unpack STAR as an acronym for some of those characteristics that I found in some of my favorite people. And when I think about favorite people, how would I define that? I'm simply a better person for having known these individuals. I'm a better version of me when I'm around them. I'm on my game. I want to perform for them. I want to be conscientious around them. They just have a way of triggering an extra motivation out of me. I'm going to introduce you to just two of my favorite people, and then I'm going to turn it over, and I'll have you discuss some of your favorite people with one other individual. But this is my coach, my high school football coach. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. In fact, my graduating class was 32, and that included 2 foreign exchange students. So if that gives you an idea of the small school I'm from. But from my high school, we were able to graduate 4 players that ended up playing in the NFL. And a lot of that had to do with the basics that were instilled in us and the work ethic that was instilled in us from our high school football coach. Now, my little town went through a couple different tragedies, and we'll talk about one a little later in the presentation. In 2008, there was an EF5 tornado that wiped out half the town. But then the following year, this particular coach fell victim to someone who had actually been in his football program. This was an individual that began having psychotic breaks, early onset schizophrenia, had some delusions of persecution around the coach, all of which were not true, but thought coach was the devil and those kind of things. And it was really a tragic situation that this former football player ended up taking his life. But some of the lessons that I've learned from him, and I had an opportunity last fall to go back to my hometown. There's an education series put together honoring his legacy, and that was such an honor to do. And then this is my grandma, Ihde. She was with us for 101 years. She got married when she was 16, had 10 kids, and there's 50, 60, some of us grandkids, and just unconditional love. And she loved to laugh, loved to play games, and just such a sweet, sweet spirit. Right up until the end. So and when I look at those two individuals, I can easily see some of those characteristics that we're going to be talking about today. But I'm going to try this out. We're going to try our first breakout room here, and in your breakout room, you're going to be with just one other person. And I'm going to see if we can. I may have to try this out, see what we can do here. But I'm going to give you one other person that you can talk about, some of your favorite people. And I'm only assigning one other person because I want you to have plenty of time to share. And John, I may have to kick this to you because I'm not seeing the same option that I had before here. Let me do this. I think I am kind of figuring this out. Remember when I asked for grace right off the bat there? Let's
You can
try
toss
this.
me if you need to, otherwise.
All right, let's see here. Yeah, I thought I could just send them. Okay, whoops, I got another one here. We're going to send everybody. I don't want you to be in a room by yourself. So you may have 3 people in your room, and we'll check this out. So, did anything happen on your end? Was I able to do that? Are you
Uh,
assigned rooms?
no, we didn't get the invites
Okay,
yet.
let me
I don't.
do this. How about that? All right. Did we all get breakout rooms now? I think so.
Hi, Neil. It's Kelly. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Hi. Am I?
Hi.
Am I? I'm past present for the Oregon chapter, so very interested to see who all is participating today. Oh, I see folks joining. Great.
Awesome. They're just coming back from assigning them to a breakout room, and I want to know if that went okay. If you guys can just
Yeah, that
hit
was fun.
the chat. That went okay?
Yeah, it
Fantastic.
was
Awesome.
pretty flawless. We saw when your little text message came through, letting us know how much time there was, and
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. And I did get a chance to check out the chat, and shout out to Susan, who's got a few tickets on I-80. That's funny. And John, you've been on I-80 a few times in Western Nebraska.
I didn't. We never went into it because we were just talking about other things like weather and whatnot. But my wife is from a small town in Iowa as well. That's why I was driving on I-80
Oh,
so much.
yeah, yeah.
She's from Fort Madison. Where are you from?
A little town called Parkersburg. So that's kind of
Parkersburg.
northeast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there. So good. Well, I'm glad that went okay, and you can see me and hear me okay, and we're good to go.
Yep.
All right. So let me get back here to my slides. So thanks for doing that. And what I see with my audiences when I invite them to do that, we come to life a little bit when we talk about some of our favorite people, and so hopefully you had just a few minutes to talk about one or two special people in your life. I know those 5 minutes go pretty quick. These slides I added, there's just 2 or 3 of them here, but I've added these over the years because unbeknownst to me, it surprised me some of the impact that this presentation has had on folks, saying, boy, it really was thought-provoking, or it brought me to examine some emotions that I wasn't really prepared for. And so I just add a little bit of a heads up at the beginning of this, that we may touch on a few things that may feel uncomfortable for you. Again, nothing huge, but I don't know your background. I don't know some of your experiences. And so I just want to share a little bit of some of the things from Brene Brown's phenomenal book, Daring Greatly, and just introduce you to that there may be some vulnerability as we go through some of this, and to remind you that if you are feeling vulnerable or a little exposed or challenged in some areas, good for you. That's vulnerability is not a weakness. Uncertainty, risk, emotional exposure, those are just simply not optional. Those are things that we are going to experience on a daily basis. And our only choice is a question of how much we want to lean into that. How much do we want to engage with some of those challenges? And obviously, you are all facing some 2020 for all of us has been quite the challenge here. But I want to remind you, perfect and bulletproof are seductive, but they simply don't exist in the human experience. And even striving to be perfect and bulletproof is somewhat of a losing proposition. It's not a worthwhile pursuit. But here's the crux of the struggle when we deal with vulnerability. I want to experience your vulnerability, but I myself don't want to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is courage in you, but it's inadequacy in me. And I'm drawn to your vulnerability, but I'm repelled by mine. And we'll see how the time goes here today, because there is one clip that that I hope to show you that really embodies someone being vulnerable after making a mistake. And I'm guessing you would experience some of those kind of things. So just a heads up, don't know if that will be the case or not, but just kind of a heads up on that as we go through here. All right, before we jump into the acronym, I got to tell one other quick story here that gets us right into it, and it's at my expense. I've got a few strengths going for me, but I'm not mechanically gifted. I'm mechanically challenged. If I go to put even hang something on the wall, I'm going to be so far worse off a half hour later, and it's going to be worse. And so it struck me in my life how far I had gone without having AAA. I don't have a clue about my vehicles. I wouldn't know what to do if I had a flat tire. And so sometime in my late 20s, I got AAA just in case that happened. And sure enough, one day, noticed, yep, got a flat tire, called AAA, no problem. She said, yeah, I will take care of you. Can you tell me where the vehicle's located? And this is where I hesitated a little bit. I had to question, do I have any semblance of pride in this area or not? And I decided I didn't. And I said, well, the vehicle is located in my garage. And she tried to be professional, but the laughter still didn't quite get there, which I was okay with. But the mechanic for sure didn't have a lot of professionalism, and he probably couldn't wait to go back and tell the story of changing a tire in this, guy's garage. I almost went back into the house, got dressed up in work clothes, acted like I was late for a meeting. That's why I couldn't get. I'm like, no, I'm not worried about it. And part of that was my recognition why I needed AAA was kind of the first step that we're going to talk about here. And we're going to talk about self, and we're going to break self down into 3 different areas. And the first area is self-awareness. I had to come to a point to understand and be self-aware of my strengths and my weaknesses. And that was one area that would cause a lot of headaches. Paying $80 a year or whatever I pay for that is peace of mind and money well spent. But that really is step 1. When I think about the people on my list who are my favorite people, they are self-aware individuals. They have a really good sense of who they are. And we're going to look at these kind of prompt questions, and then I do have a poll question coming up just after this slide. So if you want to ready for that. But one of the ways we grow our self-awareness is just asking ourselves these introspective questions. Who are we? What strengths do we have? What kind of personality do we have? What are my passions? What are my preferences? What are the goals? What do I want out of life? What's my purpose here, and how can I make an impact on others? I know we have a smaller group and we're just kind of getting to know each other, but I do have one other question that I need to ask here, and maybe we can put that into a poll question. So Jeff or John, let me know how that goes. But I have to ask the question, are you annoying? Very simple, straightforward. Of the 22 out there, just curious, are you annoying or not? Like I said, it's a little bit intrusive. In the anonymous polling at least allows you to remain anonymous. When I am face-to-face with audiences, I will ask them to raise their hands. And so, all right, we got the majority of the people who voted here. 63% said yes, 38% said no, so 38% of you are liars, or you really haven't been told yet that you are annoying. And it's a fun question to ask. Good for you, for those of you that are willing to own it. But the reality is we're all annoying, and I'll explain that in a second. Sometimes with audiences, I will ask them if they're annoying, and I get a few brave souls because, again, they're having to raise their hand. And then I ask, are you sitting beside someone who's annoying? And then I get a lot more hands there. But when I break the news saying you're all lovely, wonderful people, but you are annoying, and you being you is going to be annoying to someone who has a different personality or preference. So let me give a quick example with this. I do a lot with personality testing, and with Myers-Briggs and extroverts and introverts, and back in the day when pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of flying, and I'm an introvert. It doesn't necessarily look like it when I'm on a stage or maybe in this setting, but I'm an introvert. So when I get on a plane, I want to get my headphones on, and I get out my Kindle, and my shoulders kind of hunch in, and everything about my body language says, leave me alone. And then here he comes, just strolling down the aisle and saying hi to people, and he plunks down there, and he said, business or pleasure, and he just jumps right in to a conversation. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know who you are. I don't really even care to know who you are. I just want to do my flight. This Kindle is far more interesting than you are. If I'm really honest, those are the things that I'm thinking. And he's sitting here going, how rude. What a lovely way to spend the time, just chatting the flight away. I mean, the time will just fly by. Simply you being you, and most of the times we're not doing it consciously that we're being annoying to others, but we are. And so if we've gained a little self-awareness already that you're annoying, fantastic. We're off to a great start here. Anything in the chat that I'm missing with some of these things, let me know too. Mark Twain has this great quote: two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you kind of figure out why and what is your purpose here. When it comes to self-awareness, there's this thing called Johari window. You may have seen this before. There's some things that I know about myself and others know. This is out in the public arena. But there's things that others don't know about me that I know about myself. And that's kind of when I'm putting on a facade. When they're saying, how are you doing today? And I smile and nod and say, I'm doing terrific. I'm maybe hiding some of the depression or anxiety or some of the other emotions that I'm feeling. But there's some things that other people know about us that we don't know about ourselves, and those are our blind spots. In fact, we are really, really good at reading others and speed reading others and having insights into other people's personality and things that they may not have any clue of. And then there's some things that they don't know and we don't know either. Ways to grow your self-awareness, as I talked about, I do a lot with personality testing. Just curious, and you can put this in the chat, as some of you have taken the Myers-Briggs personality test, if you know your 4 letters. Would also be curious too if anybody has been part of a 360 evaluation process where everybody around you gets to give you anonymous feedback. And I'm just going to jump in the chat and see if there's anything there. Okay. If you've gone through that 360 process, it can be a harrowing experience because, again, it's anonymous, so people can tell you exactly what they think of you. And I remember getting my first one. I was doing some Stephen Covey's 7 Habits training, and they prep you and they prep you and they prep you and they say, you know, here's the thing, you're going to get lots of positive feedback on there, pay attention to that, but human nature, you will tend to accentuate the negative. And that's exactly what I did. There were some good things going on there, and then I get to my first negative thing there, and it says, sarcastic sense of humor. Who said that? I bet Becky did. She has no sense of humor. You just go to this really negative place, and once you just let it sit and let the dust settle a little bit, and you kind of go, okay, is there some truth to this? And then you go, wow, they really gave me a gift. They gave me some insights that I did not know that I had. Anything in the chats, or if people have had that, yeah, intimidating, yeah. I got someone chatting me privately saying, yeah, so they were told in a 360 they were intimidating. Yeah, and feel free to jump on the video and audio if you have something to share with that as well. It's better to understand and own your weaknesses and shortcomings than to have other people talk about them. The more you, especially if you're in leadership, you're on a stage, everybody's watching you. So own that stuff that you're not great at and put it out there for folks rather than have them talking about you. Big fan of Marcus Buckingham, big fan of Strength Finders. He wrote a book called The One Thing You Need to Know for Individual Success. Discover what you don't like doing and stop doing it. Well, that's really simple. Thanks, Marcus. But if you apply the principle, all of us have stuff that we don't necessarily like to do, but if you really apply that principle and saying, how is it that I can set myself up for the greatest success by putting myself in positions to work off of my strengths rather than my weaknesses, that's going to improve my morale, it's going to improve how I work with others. It's some pretty sage advice there. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of emotional intelligence, and I don't have time to unpack all of the emotional intelligence, but you'll see the 3 things that we're going to be talking about here have some relevancy to emotional intelligence. But part of self-awareness when it comes to our emotions is understanding that what we're feeling, what emotion that we're feeling at any given time. And then the next step is going to be able to regulate those emotions somewhat. So if you look at that, I'm sure you've seen that poster with a bunch of different emotions over there. If you're feeling angry or frustrated or ecstatic or mischievous. When my kids were little, at bedtime or dinner time, we did mad, sads, and glads. When were you mad today? Was there a time you were sad today? When were you really happy? And just beginning to help them understand and tie in their emotions. And some of you who lead teams, who are managers, you know that some folks are stuck even on this level, that they don't really own the emotions. Their emotions kind of get the best of them. At meetings, they are unable to corral some of those things. Here's a scary statistic. They say that the Gallup company did this thing where they define self-awareness as the ability, can you describe yourself as most people experience you? And they found that only 20% of people are self-aware according to that definition. And that's really step one of emotional intelligence. Self-aware individuals also understand their values. They understand how those values play out. Again, we don't have time to do that in our setting today, but sometimes even a 15-minute exercise on value clarification. What are my top 5 values? And then you open up your calendar and go, where am I spending my time? Do my values end up representing my time? Because time is the litmus test. That is going to tell us what really truly is valuable. Goals, motivations, all of those things play into it as well. And your self-awareness will continue to grow through the years. Your personality, that's not going to change, but your self-awareness certainly will grow through the years. But here's the catch. We are lousy self-evaluators. We need some outside perspective because we have this thing called positive illusion. We tend to see ourselves much bigger and grander than we actually are. We are incredibly narcissistic at our core, and so we tend to put ourselves in the best light. So a quick example of that, I was working with teams and managers, and they were doing a self-evaluation on their competencies in their role, and then their team would also fill out a survey on how well, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're fulfilling those competencies in their role. And this one individual had a team of 5 reports. His report, his self-evaluation, 10 out of 10 all the way down. And his 5 reports, this isn't 1, this is all 5 ones all the way down. Well, as a student of psychology and sociology, I am really looking forward to this meeting because the cognitive dissonance is unbelievable. How in the world is this individual going to explain the discrepancies between these scores? Well, he summed it up pretty simply. Yeah, you know what, Neil? They're wrong. They're wrong. I'm a great manager. And so when you have an individual who is so clueless, so out of touch with their self-awareness, this wasn't a reclamation project. This was a lot of work that we weren't interested in doing as an organization. So it was not fair to those 5 people to keep him in his position. And we did what we had to do as far as lining up our ducks and those kind of things. But he was asked to eventually leave the organization because he wasn't competent in his role. But according to him, he's off the charts. Now, who wants to work with an individual that person's not showing up on anyone's favorites list because they have no clue on how they're coming across to others? So we're going to try this again. Let me see if I can do this more effectively. I want you to spend a little time talking about, I'm going to see if I can recreate this. All right, we're going to recreate all rooms, and then I'm going to assign this in just a second. But because I don't think you can see this, and I'll chat it to you hopefully as well. But look at, talk about your strengths, your personality, and then own up to, is there anything about you that others might find annoying as well? So what are your strengths? What's a little bit about your personality and anything about you that you may be annoying? All right, we're going to try this out and see if this works. It looks like some of you are going to have 3 in your room, so you may have to talk a little quicker. All right. Welcome back, Tammy.
Hello.
So far, is that working okay?
Yep, it is.
Okay.
It's perfect.
Fantastic. All right, good. Yeah, and then I'm able to check a little bit here and there with the chat stuff. There's not a ton of things going on there, but I can check that every once in a while. But yeah, give me a heads up if there's anything.
Yeah, I'm watching it for you.
Okay, awesome.
You guys.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. There is not much that I would say is better doing virtually than doing face-to-face. But I gotta say, this whole feature of being able to do small group discussions and then shut you all up at one at once and bring it back, I gotta admit, as a host, that's kind of a nice thing. So I hope you had a chance to connect with some. Thank you for that, whoever chatted in there, saying that was kind of nice to meet some other people and get some interaction going in here. There's maybe one more that we will do like that. Again, just kind of depending on time here. We will spend the majority, if you're looking at your clock going, oh my goodness, this guy is not managing his time really well. We got a long way to go through this acronym. The majority of our stuff is going to be spent on this S part. And there's two other parts of this S when we talk about self-awareness. The next piece we're going to talk about is self-regulation, and then the other three will move a little faster. But self-regulation is a pretty important part of any success on personal and professional development. It is your ability to delay gratification. It is your ability to put aside some immediate things that you may want in order to meet a bigger goal. And they did this thing with called a marshmallow test, and some of you may be familiar with this. This was something that they did back in the 1960s. They were thinking that this whole idea of understanding success later in life, they really thought it was all about intelligence. And there's a phenomenal study back in the 1920s about termites and studying these geniuses for their entire life. And that didn't work out well. But they said, okay, maybe it's not intelligence. Maybe that's not the indicator for a successful life. But this ability to delay gratification, this self-regulation piece, we think is pretty important. And so what they did was they started studying these 4-year-olds. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see if I can get out of and I'm going to see if I can share this video while I talk over this. And Tammy or John, let me know if that isn't able to work. Is everybody able to see this?
It looks like it's sharing specifically your PowerPoint app and not just your screen
let me
at large.
let me just jump out of this a second. Okay, I know what I need to do. Thank you. Let me share this again.
And if you haven't done it before, Neil, if you're going to share a video, you know to click the button that says share computer audio.
Yep. So
Perfect.
let me try, and I don't want the audio, so we're gonna. It should be okay. So are we seeing this audio? Are we seeing this video now?
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go back here just to show you a little bit. So they did this marshmallow test with 4-year-olds, and this happens to be my son when he was 4 years old. Now, what they would do is they would put a marshmallow in front of these kids and say, you know what, here's the deal. This marshmallow, it's yours. You can have it, you can eat it, you can chomp it down right now. However, if you wait 15 minutes, I'm going to leave the room and I'm going to come back. And if that marshmallow is still there when I come back in 15 minutes, you get a second marshmallow. Well, this is quite a predicament for 4-year-olds. So, of course, my kids, they had to go through this marshmallow test, and I videotaped them. I left the room. I'm not around. And you can see the internal struggle of wanting to eat something and have all of this time pass. But what was fascinating is that this study alone, they found this ability to delay gratification. I mean, just look at the angst on my son's face. Now he's 16 and a half, so he's a ways beyond this. And you can see my daughter just kind of playing with her eyes a little bit and whatever you can do to kind of pass the time. But they did longitudinal studies on these kids that were able to pass this marshmallow test. And they found that look at his face. I want this. They found that they had better relationships. They did better academically. They went on to have college degrees and be successful in their marriages and their professional life. This test alone, and you would think about how our culture is now, it's even more and more and more immediate gratification with our access to phones and constant entertainment. Here's my daughter. My daughter was 6 at the time when she did it, but of course she's the firstborn and overachiever, and she wanted to do it again. And she said, I wanted to eat it so bad, but I didn't. I waited, and little brother helps out there. And they feel so proud of themselves when they're able to do something like that. And then my son too. Although I wasn't real clear with my instructions, he thought he was getting 2 additional marshmallows for a total of 3. So that ended up being a little confusing for him. All right, let's go back to my PowerPoint here. And all right. All right, we good? Did we make the transition okay? I think we probably did.
Yep.
John, we're
You
good?
nailed it.
Okay. So this is all fine and good, Neil. I mean, but how in the world do we, what's a marshmallow test? Why is that applicable in our adult lives? Well, let's talk about our personalities and the fact that we've already owned the fact that we are all annoying on some level. So, let's put my friend Mason in this scenario where he is an ESTJ, meaning that he is very organized and a little analytical, not big on the touchy-feely, huggy kind of stuff. So when he has a employee walk in and she is crying and having a rough time, and he says, "What's going on?" And she says, "Well, my cat just died." He said, "Neil, honestly, the first thought that comes into my head, the very first thought is, wow, this isn't all bad news. I mean, you're going to save like 15, 20 bucks a month on cat food and kitty litter. I mean, look at the positive side here." But he knows, and we're all weird. We all have our quirks like this. Okay. So he knows that's probably not the right thing to say. He has enough self-awareness and self-regulation not to just burst out with that question. And he stops himself, finds that little tiny feeling part of his brain way back there, and is able to say, "I'm sorry to hear about his cat," even though we know what he would do is his child would say, Fluffy died, and he's on his Excel spreadsheet reallocating those funds. That's really what he would do, but he knows that's not appropriate in that situation. So you may be sitting there going, well, this is great. I don't necessarily have this issue. I don't have any problems with self-regulation. Oh, really? Do you have any kids in youth sports? Have you ever yelled at the opponent, or have you yelled at the coach or the ref? That handsome fellow in the big black socks there in that picture, that is me. And I became a ref with my kids, partly to help them out, but it is a fascinating microcosm of human behavior. It is so wonderful. But being vulnerable, got to be 100% with you. There was a tournament that my kids were playing in, and my daughter was playing this team from Chicago, and they were really kind of rough. And I didn't think the ref was really calling and pointing that out. So I thought I was being helpful when he did call a foul to say about time. I thought that was positive and encouraging. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. As we recognized earlier, I have a sarcastic sense of humor. And the ref didn't see that way, and he asked me to leave. And as I'm getting kicked out of this game, I'm like, oh my goodness, I teach on this stuff. How did I not recognize that my emotions were getting the best of me, that I'm about ready to say something that I later would regret? And it happened. And I went up to the ref after the game and apologized, and apologized to my team. But it can happen. Definitely can happen. Can you put in the chat area if you have played an instrument? Just put in the chat area what instrument you have played. A little tidbit that I didn't realize, that if you have kids that are hoping to get a full ride scholarship at some point, get them playing the tuba, get them playing the French horn, because colleges will give scholarships. They don't have enough of those. So we got a lot of instruments in here. Sax, oboe, beautiful, beautiful. Piano, fantastic. Violin. I do the violin. You have to go back and thank your parents for putting up with early violin is somewhat painful. Trumpet, saxophone, yeah, we got a lot of. Yeah, you should. Yes, Jeff, you guys should start a band. There's a lot of talent there. The reason why I bring up instruments, those of you who have played, and even if you didn't, you can relate to this. When you first start playing an instrument, there's no instant gratification there. It's not very fun. You can barely get a note out. I had piano lessons for 10 years. My kids were going to take piano lessons. That was not going to be an option for them. It was just something that they had to do. And the reason for that is that I wanted to teach them that mastery and excellence requires self-discipline. You can't do something extraordinary without having some of the self-regulation and some of the self-discipline. And it was really never about the piano, but it was about learning how to practice and the rigor it takes. And when they got to a recital and they had to play their piece from memory in front of an audience, being nervous, and they nail it. And it's beautiful, and the phrasing and the dynamics, it all comes together. I hope that feeling for them is much more enjoyable and powerful than some of the instant gratifications that they're getting through their games and their apps. And this is something that generations are starting to slip away from, not wanting to put in the work and effort it takes for some great outcome on the other side. A few other thoughts on self-regulation, and we'll wrap up this section with self-confidence. But it's not all about willpower. Sometimes we think that big changes require a lot of effort. What they're finding is that if you simply remove the temptations, if your goal is to eat fewer sweets, but all of a sudden you're in front of a pile of cookies, you've already lost. My brother and I would talk about Little Debbie snack cakes, and he said, the battle I have with Little Debbie snack cakes is not at home, because the battle I have is in the grocery store. And when I win that battle and I don't purchase them in the first place, self-regulation is much easier because they're not even in the house. So it's not about putting yourself in tempting situations and overcoming that. It's not putting yourself in those situations at all. There's that angel and devil model, and people who are really good at self-control never have those battles in the first place. So let me go on here. This is one other thing I do want to hit on with self-regulations, and this is just about making sure that what we're exposing ourselves to. Now, this is a jaw-dropping study done at the University of Tennessee that says just 5 minutes of negative stories. If you're exposed to 5 minutes of negative stories daily, here's the impact. People were more depressed. They believe the world is a negative place. They're less likely to help others, and they believe what they heard will inevitably happen to them. That's 5 minutes. My guess, I know I'm ingesting way more than that. My guess is that you are too. We can't honestly get away from it right now. So even being careful on what you are exposing yourself to, make sure that there's some positivity there. Delaying gratification is a process of scheduling the pain and pleasure of life in such a way as to enhance the pleasure by meeting and experiencing the pain first and getting it over with. It's the only decent way to live. I love that quote by M. Scott Peck. All right, the last one, self-awareness, self-regulation. We're going to talk about self-confidence, and then we're going to move on from self. Self-confidence. Let me give you a couple examples here, and this is why we love being around self-confident people. I was working with two individuals, Beth and Craig. Craig, no self-confidence, must protect, can't let anyone know his weaknesses. Closed culture, closed team, don't let anyone in, no growth, lots of secrets here. We are not a great team, and we don't want to let that out. Beth, confident, self-aware, knows what she doesn't know, isn't afraid to ask and learn. Lack of knowledge does not affect her overall self-confidence. Quick story about my daughter. She ran cross country in middle school, and neither my wife or I ran cross country. We didn't have it in our schools. But she's a natural runner like her mother, and she went out and she won her first cross country race, and we ask her, because that's what we do in the Ihde family, we dissect everything. And so I was asking her a bunch of questions, and then I asked her, when did you know? At what point in the race did you know I got this. I'm going to win this race. And her answer surprised me, and it sounds a little sounds a little cocky, but she said, Dad, I knew I was going to win the race before the gun went off. And I'm like, wow, that's a pretty big statement. But she said, no, I knew from practice I could beat everyone on my team. And I saw the other girls warming up, and I thought I had a pretty good shot. And that self-confidence went out and fueled that belief. You know what? I think I've got this. She went out and she did it, and she wasn't riddled with insecurities and questions. You need to believe that you can go out and do something, but that's not the same thing as thinking you're great. That may be just saying, I have the confidence in my abilities that I know how to do something. I'm not boasting. I'm not necessarily bragging. I'm not holding it over you, but I know that I can do this well. Self-confident people are less needy. Self-confident people are not threatened by others' gifts, talents, and abilities. Why would that be the case? Self-confident people are not threatened by others' gifts, talents, and abilities. Well, at the end of the day, they have their own strengths. They have their own abilities. And so why would I be threatened by yours? I want to celebrate yours, because your strengths and your gifts, why would they reflect on me? They have nothing to do with me unless I'm in a place that I need to compare myself to you. But if I have the self-confidence, I'm not worried about that. I don't need to do that. Wonderful book, John Maxwell's Law of the Lid, or John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. The first law is called the Law of the Lid. And the Law of the Lid says this: on a scale of 1 to 10, as a leader, if I'm a 4 out of 10, if I'm just at a 4 and I've got 7, 8s, or 9s on my team, not only am I not going to encourage them, I'm actively going to work at them. I'm going to undercut them. I'm going to sabotage them to make sure they don't get the credit, and I'm going to bring them down to my level, because no one can outshine me, because I'm an insecure leader. Insecure leaders are the worst. And so what happens in these situations, A people, A managers, they hire A people. They're not threatened. They have the self-confidence. They want the best people on their team. B people, they hire C people because they do not want to be someone outshining them. Love this quote by Lord Michaels. If you find that you're the smartest person in the room, you know what? You need to find a new room. We need people around us to challenge us, to play devil's advocate, to say, really? Because this is how I do things, and be open to those different perspectives. If I'm self-confident, I can bravely face negative feedback and not let it define me. But in the chat, I want you to put these things down. It's something that we all want. We want self-confidence. But put in the chat, where do we get? What are our sources of self-confidence? Where does this come from? Overcoming adversity, absolutely. You can look back and say, I handled this situation. I can do that. Affirmation, getting feedback from others, past successes, right? Just experience. I've been down this road before, learning from mistakes. Love it. Self-talk and doing esteemable things for esteem. I like it. Very, very good. Surviving 2020. Yes, that's very good. I like that. I'm still looking for the number one answer. The number one source of their self-confidence, and you have to think a little differently to come up with this. Yeah, self, but we are getting that from someplace. We're getting that from other people. And don't beat yourself up. There we go, Norma, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, that is the number one answer. We get it from our parents. We get it from our family of origin. Those early years are so critical for our development. And if you've had parents and caregivers that love you unconditionally, find some time to thank them, because they gave you a gift. When we are loved unconditionally in our pre-verbal, pre-cognitive state, we're still unconsciously recognizing we are loved, we are cared for, we are important enough that people are willing to invest time in us, and it sets us off on a great path. Now, still doesn't mean we're not going to have some challenges and those kind of things, but that sets us up to, this is a safe place, I'm loved, I can screw up, and it's going to be okay. Now, I've got a master's in counseling. I dealt with tough adolescents for the first third of my career, and some of those kids, not only do they have chaotic environments, they suffered abuse, now they've got to get over those issues and still find a way to find some self-confidence, and there's some serious challenges there as well. And you can see here how these three kind of interact with each other. We start out with an awareness of our personality. We set ourselves up for some success. We make some goals based on our values. We go and we do some things that require some risk for us. We put it out there. We go for things. It goes well. Okay, now I just learned that I can do this, and the cycle continues again. All right, so like I said, these next three are going to go a little faster here, but we talked about self-awareness, self-regulation, self-confidence, and that leads so well into being teachable. Sometimes with my audiences, when we're face to face, I will have them introduce one another, and they will simply say, "Hi, my name is Neil, and I don't know it all." I make them say the phrase, "I don't know it all," and even muttering those words, "I don't know it all," triggers some teachability in us. It reminds us, yeah, we don't know it all. And so I should be in a place where I can take in information, I can appreciate other people's perspective. And fortunately, I was given this lesson early on in my career. Like I mentioned, I worked with adolescents in a bunch of different mental health settings, and I was working in a group home with Dr. Gary Hoffman. And that's the individual here. And he and I hit it off, and I was sharing some observations that I had and kind of some thoughts that I had. And he was the therapist on the unit, and he really appreciated just knowing what was going on when they weren't in his office. We formed kind of a friendship. He moved on from there. He went into private practice. I went on and did my master's, and I needed an internship in an outpatient setting. And I thought, well, this is going to be great. Gary's going to get me in. It should be just slick. Well, and Gary had two partners, and I held them both in high esteem. And the three of them brought me in for an interview. And the other two partners asked me maybe 5 or 6 questions, but it was Gary that kept hammering me with question after question after question. And at some point, I'm like, his questions got harder, and my answers became kind of like educated guesses, and soon they became less and less educated and more just guesses. And finally, he asked me some question about a Jungian approach to schizophrenia or whatever it was, and I remember saying, "I don't know. I don't know." And then there was just silence, and he just let that sit there for a while, and it was awkward. And he said. Then he asked me another question, and I didn't like that question. He said, "What took you so long to admit it?" And I didn't answer that question. And he let that just sit there for a little bit. He said, "We've known for a while. You haven't known what you're talking about. We've known that for a while over here. And on this side of the table, we've got about 60 years of experience. You've got maybe a year or two. And if you think you can come in here and think you know it all, this isn't going to work really well. We see a lot of potential in you. We're ready to pour into you. But if you come in thinking that you know it all already, this isn't going to work." And man, was that awkward. Man, was I hurt. Man, I was just angry. There's a lot of emotions, but he gave me a gift. Oh, he gave me such a gift because it put me in my place, which I needed to be put in place. And then it allowed me to be teachable. And that's something I've never forgotten moving forward. Socrates has this great quote: "True wisdom comes to each of us when we realize how little we understand about our lives and the world around us." Some of the people on my list are people that I hold in high esteem for being very, very wise, and yet they're some of the most curious people too. They want to know about others. These next 4 slides, please pay close attention to these next 4 slides. This is as close as I'm going to get to a soapbox for our current culture and the climate that we are in. But this, when I did research on this and I found these quotes, it just was like hitting me between the eyes, and it seemed like it was telling a lot of truth about what we're experiencing. Opinion is really the lowest form of human knowledge. It requires no accountability, no understanding. The highest form of knowledge is empathy, for it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. So remember when I talked about earlier that we're really narcissistic monsters, and we really want to be right even about the most random things that we have an opinion on. If we form an opinion, we assume that we are so sage that that must be right. Now, here's where it gets scarier. Self-confidence, the next quote, I'm thinking of the next quote here in a second, but I want to go through these things on this slide. Self-confidence and being teachable have a symbiotic relationship. I don't need to spend time posturing or proving myself to you or others. It puts me in a place where I don't have to prove myself to you. And it puts me in a better place to learn and be curious. And we all face different challenges at different times in different ways, based both on our biology and our unique cultural upbringing. The way I see the world is not necessarily how you've experienced the world. And once we get over that, we get to be in a teachable place. No two people think exactly the same way, because no two people have lived exactly the same lives. We're all products of different thinking patterns that emerged as a result of our experience of interacting with reality, our subjective experience. So we're all products of that comes out based on our culture and how we were raised and all those kind of things. We have to set those aside when we're learning to be empathetic with others. Our subject experience is limited, and using it and the thinking patterns that create it as the baseline for understanding the world is a limited way to go through life, and it biases us in the wrong direction. So if you're willing to learn, observe, and inquire, you will find everyone has something to teach you. So I want to go ahead to this. These are the slides that I was thinking about earlier. What has happened? We're not being teachable. We're doing the exact opposite. We are subject to the confirmation bias, in-group bias. We surround ourselves with an echo chamber. We only want to reinforce the beliefs that we have about ourselves, and we're not looking for outside perspective. Now, we talked about how opinions is the lowest level of human knowledge, right? Getting positive or negative feedback to something you do or say, even if it's just an opinion, is a greater influence on your thinking than logic and reasoning. Getting positive or negative feedback about an opinion is a greater influence on your thinking than logic and reasoning. So you think about all the things that are going on in social media. And if I find my tribe that shares my exact belief system, even though it may be flawed, now all we're doing is an echo chamber and positively reinforcing one another and not letting any other outside opinions. The more sure we are that our current position is right, the less likely we are to take into account other opinions, even cold, hard scientific data. If we already believe that we're right, anything that is contrary to what we believe must be therefore wrong. If you think you know a lot about something, even if you don't, you're less likely to be curious enough to explore the topic further and will fail to learn how little you know. Hi, I'm Neil. I don't know it all. Whoever you are, you don't know it all. We collectively don't know it all. We can't. So if we think that we know a lot about something, we're not going to be curious about other people's perspective. Learners need to recognize there is a gap between what they currently know and what they could know. If they don't think that gap is there, they're simply not going to take in new information. Just earlier this week, I believe it was Tuesday, I had a chance to talk to incoming freshmen from my alma mater, and I was giving them these slides. I'm like, you're at the beginning of your academic journey. We're jealous of you starting as freshmen because it is a formative, fun period of your life. But please, please be teachable because you have a lot to learn. So thus, the outcome of political arguments on Facebook, this is what happens. You change your mind, they change your mind. You know what? No one changes anything and everybody gets ticked off. That's what happens because we are so entrenched in our own opinions and we all believe that we are right. And when you're searching around for fun little memes, you come across something like this, and please put in the chat if you understand this. Things Meatloaf would do for love. Anything or that, there's going to be an age cutoff on who gets this joke, but I trust that a few of you get that. All right. Also in the chat, since we're there, why is it hard to become teachable? What are some challenges for us becoming teachable? Any thoughts on that? Admitting that you're not the expert, admitting you need help. Yeah, we don't want to be wrong. Think about some of those early slides that I had there. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be the one raising our hand and the teacher says, no, that's you're not even close. Right. Anything else there? Thinking we already know it. Yeah. Yeah. Not investigating. Not even open to wanting to hear what the other side may have to say at some point. Yeah. And you guys hit on some of those. We don't like being vulnerable. And if you don't have a strong sense of self, a strong self-worth, you will equate needing to be taught as some sort of personal deficiency, and that could not be further from the truth. Leonardo DiCaprio said this: there's a lot of pitfalls to success, and one is not listening to criticism. One of the most important things you can do is hear criticism of yourself and embrace it. Now, if we had more time, we could chase a tangent on who gets to speak into your life and who is qualified to speak in your life. What are qualified opinions versus things, and just the general rule of thumb. I do a lot of teaching. I teach online. I've taught online for years, and my rule of thumb is if I have one or two students that are confused about something, that's probably a them problem. But if I start hearing the theme more and more and more, same thing with feedback. If I'm hearing something that seems like an outlier, I don't know if I will pay much attention to it until that becomes more of a theme that I'm hearing consistently. Great question to ask if you are inviting feedback. If you want to learn more about yourself, ask the question, what would you do differently if you were me? Phenomenal way of inviting people in to have some sort of say or some way of giving you some feedback, or how you ran that meeting, or what you did with that project, or how you handled that situation. It also tells them, I'm interested in your opinion. What would you do differently if you were me? I wouldn't ask that if I wasn't curious about what you would say there. All right, I want to go on to, oh yeah, I love this phrase, humility prevents humiliation. So if you don't want to be humiliated, keep yourself humble. That will prevent humiliation down the line. Robert Frost, education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. So let's go on to our third and fourth one here. The third one is pretty self-explanatory. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. My favorite people, they're ambitious people. They get things done. They have initiative. They are optimistic. They've got a lot of energy. They are internally motivated. There's a couple, like the marshmallow test, there's a couple ways to kind of tease out ambitious people. One way is to watch them play ring toss. Another way is to watch them play skee ball. In that middle picture there, you see that 100 off on the right corner of that picture. Great ambitious skee ball players. Apparently there's professional skee ball players. This was a career my guidance counselor did not inform me of. But you can, if they nail that for the 3 or 4 time, that's the greatest risk and reward. And if they get in a groove, that's where they're going. But ambitious people are looking for sustained success. They want to make the greatest possible impact over the longest period of time. They have a lot of determination, great work ethic, and they have a realistic understanding of their strengths and weaknesses and present challenges. It's not that they're living in a fantasy land. They know what they're up against, but they believe they have what it takes. They have a little ego. They have the audacity to say, you know what? I got this. We're going to overcome these challenges and move ahead. Ambitious people, their work ethic's on another level. They're their own worst critic and do not accept praise well. They look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, am I proud of how I live this day? Can I put my name on this day and feel good about it? A friend of mine, she's ambitious. She's got fantastic work ethic. So it's no surprise that Julie's daughter had great work ethic as well. And she was working on some sort of floor where they could watch people working on this assembly line. And the manager talked to Julie, then the supervisor just said, can we clone your daughter? I watch her on my monitor and she's just buzzing. It just makes it look like everybody else is in slow motion. This is a hard thing to teach. And if you've been around people that you just get on your team or hire, it's hard to teach someone to be ambitious. It's somewhat innate within them. Winston Churchill, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. One of my favorite comedians, Brian Regan, talks about some of his success in being ambitious in his life. And he said, typically before any kind of next step of growth for me, I know I'm on the right path when I'm feeling those butterflies. If right before I do it, I'm second guessing myself or going, what have I got myself into? I know that I'm challenging myself. I know that I'm taking a risk. And what his advice is, chase those butterflies. Go out there and do it, because there's really good things on the other side of it. I know Tammy introduced me and did a great job of that. And she mentioned I was a TEDx speaker, and I did that a couple years ago. I do this for a living. I'm a professional speaker. And yet, boy, that setting, being up there, having everything memorized for 15 minutes, and there's no safety net. There's no slides that I can point to. I remember thinking that before I went on, going, what in the world did I get myself into? So my respect level for people who are just out there doing their jobs and are willing to go up there and be a TEDx speaker, phenomenal, because it is a very, very intimidating experience. And sometimes for fun, especially at this point in the presentation, it's fun to take a look at the opposite of a concept that we are studying. So the opposite of ambitious is lazy. And so here's a few pictures that would exemplify people being lazy. This is how lazy people turn off the light. Laser pointer and hope your kitty jumps up there to do this. You know, I could get there faster, then I'd have to walk. That is pretty slow. Lazy people know the fastest way to do the job, says Bill Gates. There's a little something to that. They work hard at getting out of work, I think is a good way to say it. Yeah. That's a little ingenious too. Not much challenge there with that Rubik's Cube. Just move the branch. This just makes me shake my head. I have a hard time even looking at this picture. I've got a little OCD going on. So what on earth were they doing? This is a security guard hiding behind a picture of someone, of an active security guard. You know, it's even just too much to hold on to a device. So let's just now, ladies, this was a new one for me. I did not know about this, and typically when I have an audience, there are roars of laughter from ladies going, "Oh my goodness!" That are, and they admit that they've done this. That you only paint the toenails that are going to be out in a certain shoe. I think it's pretty clever, actually, but I had no idea. Let's skip the Christmas tree this year. Let's just do an air freshener. Yeah, that's easier. This young man is sitting on a box that contains a chair that he hasn't quite gotten to yet. Drop something out the window. Let's not go down those few flights of stairs. Let's get the vacuum cleaner out and get it. This one I can appreciate. I hate changing clocks, and they do too. So just whatever time it is, just subtract an hour. That's what's going on there. Yes, honey, I'm playing with our daughter. She's on the swing right now. And then, yeah, let's just lay down and play too. But it is funny. There's a term, a sociological term for these lazy people called social loafers, and they attach themselves to ambitious people, and they like to take credit for what they do. But ambitious people and lazy people don't work well together. They don't understand them. They don't respect their lack of personal work ethic. It's very, very difficult. So Anne Frank had this to say about laziness. Laziness may appear attractive, but work gives satisfaction. Very true. So we are on the home stretch. We got another 5-6 minutes here. We are on our R. Any guesses on what that may be? Put that in the chat. Any guesses on what R may be? Based on what we're talking about here, self-awareness, teachability, ambitious, what would be something that people could, respectful is a good guess, demonstrate when they meet challenges, they're able to bounce back from them. Reflection, yeah, very good. Oh, did I already give it away? I must have. I went ahead on my slide. Doggone it. Okay, so we're talking about resiliency. User error on this end. Sorry about that. We're talking about resiliency, and this really embodies a lot of the things that they just kind of tend to flow through here. This is definition. It's the ability to spring back from and successfully adapt to adversity. And there's a story of the two brothers that had an alcoholic father, and one of the brothers went on to become an alcoholic himself, and the other didn't touch a drop of alcohol. And they asked the first brother, "Why did you become an alcoholic?" And he said, "Well, because of my dad." And they asked the second brother, "Why did you not touch a drop of alcohol?" And he said, "Well, because of my dad." So we're studying why similar settings bring about different reactions in others. And it's a tricky thing to nail down, this resilience. But the good news is we can grow it. We can learn how to be more and more resilient here. This is some pictures from my hometown of Parkersburg, Iowa, when that EF5 tornado came through. The top picture off to the left is my house that I grew up in. My folks were just getting back into town. It was Memorial Day weekend, and anyone from the Midwest, and John, yeah, being in Iowa, you may appreciate this too. When a tornado siren goes off, we're supposed to go to the basement. We're supposed to go someplace safe. But what we do is instead we walk outside and we take a look at the sky. But when my parents did that in this particular situation, they saw a neighbor up the street sprinting into their house. And so they looked up and saw why, and the tornado was a half-mile wide at that point. And it wiped out a third of the town. It just looked like a bomb went off, and the high school was taken out. But 17 months later, we had a brand new high school. Most of the town had been rebuilt, and disaster experts came in from across the country to study how did you do this? Well, the answer was pretty simple. Resiliency was part of the DNA of when you're part of a small town. You don't sit around and feel sorry for yourself too often. You pick up and you rebuild your lives. Resilient individuals can more readily make a realistic assessment of a setback and admit how they contributed to that. Another example here of two managers, both wanted the job and both weren't offered the job, and one had it. He stormed in and said, "This is ridiculous. I deserve this job. I've been put in so many years here. This should have been mine, and you don't know what you're doing." Well, that individual just proved why they didn't get the job in the first place. The second manager went home, mulled it over, was upset, was frustrated, was questioning whether or not they should continue to work for this organization. His spouse helped talk him down a little bit, and she said, "Well, why don't you go in and ask?" And he went back in and said, "Hey, can you give me some feedback on my interview? Is there something that I can take away from this, something that I'm missing?" And they said, "Oh, I'm so glad you came back in. I meant to, this is my fault. I should have had this conversation with you. Of course, you would have been great in this position, but there's a job opening up in 3 or 4 months that you're perfect for, and I didn't want to start you in one job and then take you out and do that again." So just that resiliency of saying, okay, I'm not going to react emotionally, some of that self-awareness and self-regulation coming in there. Yeah, it's interesting. They even did a study with people who do cold calling and sell insurance. The number one factor of those people who are successful are those people who have high resilience, because they don't take the rejection as being personal. They know in their head, I have to make 100 calls before I make that sale. So every rejection is one call closer to me getting that sale. It's just an absolutely different mindset. So I'm going to wrap this up here, and I want to leave a little time for some questions, but I'm going to leave you with a challenge. We started out talking about our favorite people, and we also talked about kind of our circle of concern and our circle of influence. So my challenge to you is, if I ask your circle of influence, if I ask those individuals who are in your life to put down on a piece of paper who some of their favorite people are you living and conducting yourself in such a way that your name would be at the top of that list? Someone that they admire, that they go to, that they aspire to be like, and have some of those characteristics. So that's my challenge going forward. John and Tammy, I'm going to turn things over to you. I'm going to be available for some questions here, but I also want to be mindful of our time. And I'll check out if there's anything in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Neil. Does anyone have any questions for Neil?
What was the name of your TED Talk?
Oh boy, that's terrible. I should know it right. It was a really long title. It was about Dr. Seuss, Dr. Seuss's Guide to Contentment. And I took an obscure Dr. Seuss book. Let me tell you how lucky you are. And I did a talk around lessons in contentment from Dr. Seuss. But what made it extremely harrowing is that I memorized and recited some of his passages, and I said them very quickly. So it's one of those rhythm things that if you miss ones, you're going to be tumbling. But yes, you can check that. If you just do Neil Ihde TEDx talk, you should be able to find that out there.
Any other questions for Neil? Well, Neil, that was a great session. So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And fingers crossed, I will get to meet some of you. Is it May that you're hoping?
Yes, May is our big event. We would love to have you come visit us.
Yeah, it's set up that if things are going to be there, if it's going to go off, that I'll be there to conduct a session. So I would love a chance to get to meet some of you and interact with you. We all would love to get together.
Perfect. Don't forget, that is that's our session where you need to dress up. So we'll be sure to let you know what to dress up as.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So. If there's nothing else, I will jump off on this end. But thank you, Tammy and John and Jeff, for your assistance. I think this went off pretty well, technically speaking.
It was a great job. It was very fun to do the breakout. So thank you very much.
Good. Yeah, and we may, going forward, certainly incorporate those. Those are good things. So, awesome. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time and attention. And my contact information is out there. I thought I had it on this slide. So if you have some additional questions, feel free to reach out to me.